I was even muted the whole time. Can you imagine? But I do have someone in the back channel. Don't worry. This is me. Um, yeah. So you're gonna have to get used to it. This is. You can tell that I'm like really floundering with my words here, guys. Okay, really floundering with my words. But yeah, this is me. Hi, my name is SIIIG. My real name is Jerome, but my name is SIIIG, and it's a pleasure to meet all of you. We have a stream for you guys today, and it's with a person that I really, really, really do love and respect, and I follow him on Instagram. So, anyways, it is a good person to have on the channel. His name is Professor Joshua Sijuwade. Joshua Sijuwade, hi.
Hi. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sig. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
I really enjoy your content. So yeah, thank you for inviting me on.
No, I honestly, it was a blast. We were talking in the back channel before having you on, and we were just going like, KKK going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it was great. And I really did appreciate it as well. Before we get started, obviously, guys, socials are already there, so go and do that kind of thing, please. But that being said, we obviously, by the title of the stream, have a particular topic, and the topic is basically whether Muslims and Christians worship the same God. Now, the background of this conversation was obviously there was a debate that was on Timcast. I don't know if you've heard of it, Josh, but there was a debate on Timcast, and obviously it was Jay Dyer, Timothy Gordon, and a Protestant. That was like he was like inquiring into Anglicanism, and the topic came up of whether or not different faiths that aren't Christians worship the same, God, deity as Christian groups. And the basic idea was that obviously Jay Dyer as an Orthodox Christian said no, and then other Christians said yes. The basic idea was that obviously Jay Dyer as an Orthodox Christian said no, and then other Christians said yes. Yeah, sorry, it was coming back in my ear. But yeah, other people said yes, but I obviously take the negative position, and I have my own reasons. And I noticed that you also contributed to the conversation by publishing an article of your own, and I believe that's published now, right? Fully? Am I correct in that? Or
yeah, so it's still forthcoming, but it's sort of there'll be no more revisions to it, sort of at this stage. But it's still forthcoming.
Right. Which is good. By the way, guys, when it does come out, if you do want to help contribute, go and follow Josh at on his academia.edu page, and if you want to, buy the article, okay? Buy the article. Make sure you buy it, purchase it. Make sure you cough up some money, and make sure you can help our boy out. It is a very nice article. If you want to read the version that isn't forthcoming, obviously it's on academia.edu on Josh's account, so go and follow him on there as well to keep up with all the latest stuff that he posts and everything like that. So for those that haven't read the paper, obviously, why did you make it, and second, what was the approach that you specifically took to this conversation?
Yeah, so something that I've been interested in for quite a while, actually, before this sort of erupted as a big debate online, because it was actually an issue that came up nearly around 9 years ago, where there was a professor at Wheaton College who came out saying that Christians and Muslims worship the same God. And then she was I think they were asking her to sort of take back her statement. She didn't, and so she was let go. And then it became actually a big news worthy issue. Like, people were questioning, do Christians and Muslims worship the same God? And I never really thought about it in depth then, but I always had a position that I just don't believe that it's the case. And then when sort of it now started going back into people's minds, this question, and people were questioning again, I said, okay, let me actually sit down and really think through this, because I think a lot through my writing, and because I'm able to sort of formulate, let's say, a syllogism or write something out, the sentence, and say, oh, actually, no, that doesn't seem right. And so I sort of think through when I'm writing. That's why I do spend quite a lot of time writing. And where I sort of had two versions of the paper. The first version of the paper was answering again, no, they don't worship the same God. But the argument was more just at a metaphysical level. And there were a few holes that could be picked with it. And so then I said, okay, let me sit down again and let me rethink this. Maybe I do, because sort of my area of, so I work as a philosopher of religion. That's sort of my specialism. But because of I've done philosophy of religion for quite some time,
Mm-hmm.
with philosophy of religion, you end up having to sort of become a master of different areas to be able to do philosophy of religion effectively.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so that allowed me to sort of pick up an additional specialism in metaphysics. So I said,
Mm-hmm.
okay, drawing on my metaphysical knowledge, what
Mm-hmm.
can we say about Christians and Muslims worshiping the same God?
Mm.
And it was sort of the position that from sort of my argument that they do not. But there was more that
Mm-hmm.
needed to be said from a sort of a linguistic standpoint, that is drawing
Mm-hmm.
from the philosophy of language,
Mm-hmm.
because what we're really saying is, are we referring to the same thing
Mm-hmm.
when we use the term God? Are
Mm-hmm.
Muslims referring to the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
Are Christians referring to the same thing?
Mm-hmm.
And so reference is an area of philosophy of language, a very important area. And so I said, okay, let me utilize what I know also about philosophy of language,
And
bring
then
it
combine
together
it.
with, combine it with my metaphysical sort of approach as well.
Right.
And I come to sort of a defense of my position that they do not worship the same God. I do believe that the second version, the one that's on academia, is, well, in my own personal opinion, successful in showing that they do not worship
Refers to the same God.
Yeah.
So for you, like, so Josh, this is where I actually take a departure from the standard approaches, because usually I've seen the conversation develop as, oh, we just need to know whether they're referring to the same God. If they refer to the same God, then surely they worship the same God. I took the approach that even if you are referring to, in many cases, the same God, I believe that worship is a particular intentional act or intentional action that might not guarantee that simply referring to the same God would carry that over to when you're worshipping whatever God it is that you worship. And I sort of have this idea of saying, maybe Muslims do refer, maybe there are some Muslims that are referring to the same God, especially in conversation, when we have like disagreements, for example. But I think when they go away from those particular disagreements and then they are worshipping or praying to Allah, I think there is some sort of change that happens whereby they're not successful anymore in praying to the same God of Christians, even though they were debating about the same God of the Christians before. I know that's a bit of a wacky perspective, but I think that that makes sense in light of the conversations that we do have. Like, say, for example, like Josh, like if I say, like, if I tell you, right, Drake is a millionaire, right? You can either agree or disagree, right? Do you think Drake is a millionaire, for example, Josh?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, I do.
Right. I'm going to say no, I don't think he's a millionaire, right? Now, when you go and say, oh, I high five Drake, right? You may be referring to the action of high fiving, let's say, the millionaire Aubrey Drake Graham. I might be referring to the Christian apologists that actually debated Ali Dawah 3 weeks ago. So there is something that's happened there. Even though we may have been referring to Drake being a millionaire in the first sentence, the actual action of high-fiving Drake doesn't seem to correspond to that just because we use Drake in the same two sentences or things like this. So I think in the case of Muslims, obviously when they when they're debating, they are debating the concept of God that people should try to agree on. So there may be some sort of sameness objection there. But I think that when Muslims are praying, they're not praying to the God that they were just having those disputes on. I think what's going on is they're actually praying to whoever revealed the Quran to Jibreel. And that specific entity they are calling Lord, that specific entity they're giving their complete servitude to, that entity itself is not the same entity as obviously the, Trinitarian God of the Bible, whatever the case may be. So I think that there is that sort of departure when they refer to God in prayer, different to when they refer to God in conversation. So I don't know if you agree, disagree.
Yeah, so I'll just raise some criticisms for us to think about of this. So what someone could say firstly is, let's say in a theological context, it's completely correct that worship is an intentional act. So there has to be intent there. But then if we are, let's say we're aiming at, so Muslims are aiming at God and Christians are aiming at God. And Muslims are intending to aim at God and Christians are intending to aim at God.
Yeah.
In their worship, in their prayer, in their reverence towards him. Then in a theological context, one could say, would God allow the transformation for the Muslim to take place when they're intending to refer to the one God? So let's say we just define God as the supreme creator of all things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the Muslims are aiming to pray to and worship the supreme creator of all things. And so are Christians. then when their intentions, even though their worship and the way that they revere God might not be the way in which God wants it to be done, the fact of them intending to worship Him, God will then accept that as a form of them offering reverence towards Him, and so allow that worship to be directed towards Him. Now, I'll give you an example. So, let's say my daughter has a very let's say superficial understanding of a person that I am.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
Or being a young child, she doesn't have a robust understanding of who I am as a person.
Of course.
So she doesn't know all my details. She doesn't know what job she'll know I teach, but she doesn't know what I teach. She doesn't know the sort of academic sort of background I have.
Yeah.
So there are many things that my daughter's missing out on,
Of course.
which are very important in sort of defining me as a person that I am. And my let's say my elder daughter, one of my older daughters, she has a better understanding. Now, if my younger daughter was trying to communicate with me, would I say, because you are not referring to me or relating to me in the way that I want you to relate to me as, I'm not going to accept whatever thing that you're doing. No, I would take into account the intention that she has to want to relate to me as her father.
Yeah.
And then I would ignore the incorrect, sort of inchoate understanding that she has of me,
of course,
given her ignorance. My elder daughter as well. I will take on her form of her form of interaction with me.
Yeah.
So what I'll normally do in the state of ignorance is there'll be sort of because the intention is there, it overrides the mistaken understanding that
of
the person
who
has
you are,
of who you are. And we would obviously say this in a theological context, because if the Muslim is really trying to worship God, but they just have, let's say you have a Muslim who's never even been exposed to Christianity, for example, and all they know is Islam, and they don't know about the revelation God has provided through Christ, then would it be fair for one person to say, well, God is not going to allow that intention to carry through in their worship practice towards Him because of their lack of understanding?
Right. Of course.
So this sort of then dovetails into my distinction, which we can speak about in a second, between ignorance and denial. And this is where it's very important, because what I would say is ignorance allows reference to remain. It allows the intentional act to remain, but denial doesn't. Denial cuts the chain as such of reference, and it also redirects the worship towards something else.
Right.
So if there's ignorance in play with someone, then, so for example, with my child's example, she's ignorant. That's the only reason.
Right, but she's still referring to you.
But she's still referring to me because the intention is to refer to me. She just has. So basically, the intention overrides the mistaken belief that she has.
Right.
But then, if we have denial, and let's say my daughter's older, but she's denying everything about me. Let's say, for example, I'm a man, and my daughter, starts calling me Mrs. Okay, or she starts calling me things which are which are normally references to females.
Right.
I'm not going to speak to you when you're speaking to me like that. I'm going to reject her desire to refer to me, because she might be annoyed at me and trying to be rude to me or whatever, because she's denying knowing in full knowledge that I'm not like this. But if my younger daughter mistakenly was calling me Mrs., I'll say,
right.
That's what I mean, because there's ignorance there. So her intention isn't to do that. But when there's denial, that denial in a way overrides the intention, so it doesn't latch on to what you're trying to sort of convey as such. But we can sort of go through that more as we go through the general.
So then in touching on that, then obviously there's this clear distinction that's been made between ignorance and denial, or what some people call ignorance and rejection, right? This has obviously been something that people have tried to respond to, but even in the same analogy with like the daughter with the ignorance, there is still this like fundamental presupposition that the daughter is still trying to refer to you in some way. And not just that, but that the daughter has some point of contact to you whereby every intentional act that she like attempts succeeds in intention because of the relationship she has to you. But what if I said that your daughter in this example gets an icon of, let's say, Saint Jerome. So someone gave me a really nice icon of Saint Jerome recently, right? Let's say that when she thinks of, Josh, she thinks of this, and not just this, but when she says dada, she says this. Like, this specifically is dada. Obviously, you're going to be like, oh, that's cute, but you're not going to say, well, she's referring to me. She's referring to this, right? And I would say that, like, when it comes to even Muslims that are in denial, which is sort of like my particular point, for many Muslims that are in denial, I'm not saying all of them, but for many that are in denial, the religion of Islam is constituted such that it's not just antithetical to Christianity, like, oh, it says things that can't be reconciled with Christianity, but it specifically is one that comments on Christianity and then critiques it. So, like, when you read the Quran, let's say you have a very pious, faithful Muslim, you have to know who Jesus is. You actually have to know who the character of Isa is, and you have to say that whoever that character is, as represented by the Christian community, as it's said in the Quran, that person isn't the person you're praying to. That person is not the person you're worshipping. Rather, this other entity is the person that you are worshipping or praying to, whatever. And let's say as an ignorant Muslim, you're just going to take that as the case. You're going to say, oh, okay, cool, yeah, Jesus, or the Christians, yeah, I know the Christians, whatever. And then you're going to start praying to whoever Allah is as distinct from Jesus. So when I created this particular objection, I had in mind the fact that when a person reads the Quran faithfully, you are led to the rejection of not just like Christianity, but specifically the person of Jesus as an object of worship, or a sabasma, or some sabasmic item, as Paul says in the book of Acts. So I would say that as a rebuttal to the idea that maybe some people who are just in ignorance may be unfortunately trying to worship the same God, but just like either lack the tools, the materials, or the proper way by which they can have like the fullest intentional act possible.
Yeah.
What would you say to that?
Yeah, just firstly, I can't see you, so I wanted to see your icon, but I can
Oh,
see my.
well, the icon
Yeah,
of Jerome. Hold on, let me put myself on a double cam. As you can see, the
okay.
TIG is burst, as you can see. But
Okay.
let me
Yeah.
do this, right? So I can actually send it to you, but this is the icon of Saint Jerome.
Okay.
See, yeah,
Oh,
that's fire. This looks good.
yeah,
You know
it's
what I'm
very
saying?
nice.
I
Very, very
appreciate
nice.
that. If I could
Yeah,
ask, right, who would be
yeah,
your favorite saint right now? I know this is getting way off topic, but just like
yeah,
as a quick addendum, as a quick side, who would be your
yeah.
favorite saint right now?
Oh, Gregory of Nazianzus.
Nice.
Very, very, very influential in my thinking, the
Okay.
Trinitarian thinking. And yeah, I just love his writing. His
Mm,
approach as well is very. It's just very spiritually led.
mm,
So, for example, in his writing, he will emphasize the importance of faith-seeking understanding before
yeah.
answer. He was really emphasizing you can really only even do theology if you have a robust spiritual
Faith.
life, and that's really affected my thinking.
Wow.
So yeah, definitely Gregory of Nazianzus.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's sick. No, I really do
yeah,
now. I really do like appreciate
yeah,
that. Thank you. Um,
no problem.
so
Yeah,
to go
so
back to it.
just in response to what you were saying, yeah.
Mm,
So I agree with you wholeheartedly,
oh, wow.
because this sort of moves into what I was arguing for,
Mm,
um, because when it comes to Islam, what you have is a communal denial of the essential aspect of Christianity.
right.
So cast in sort of more of the linguistic approach that I adopted from a philosopher called Gareth Evans.
Mm-hmm.
So we have this idea that when you're referring to something, so you use a word.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, for example, the word Madagascar. So this is a real historical example.
Mm,
So Madagascar used to refer to a part of mainland Africa. So it
right.
was originally referring to mainland Africa. So when people
Mm-hmm.
spoke about it, when people thought about it, when they had the intentional acts of thinking and speaking, they'll be
Mm-hmm.
referring to a part of
Mainland.
mainland Africa.
Right.
But then Marco Polo, very influential explorer, when he was in his writings writing about Africa, he mistakenly, from the story sort of is a little bit difficult to understand, but he might have misheard the name or something like that, but he mistaken
Mm-hmm.
Madagascar to actually refer to an island off of Africa.
Mm,
And so he started using the term Madagascar for the island off of Africa and not for mainland Africa. Now,
mm,
because of his influence in the European sort of sphere of reality,
mm-hmm.
people then, when they started exploring Africa and they started speaking and writing about Africa,
Mm-hmm.
they adopted Marco Polo's designation of Madagascar as an island and not as mainland Africa.
Mm,
And so what happened here is that there was actually a split in reference. So instead of reference being it can be a split or it can be a change, actually. So the split would be that the people who are living in mainland Africa, they'll still be referring to where they're living as Madagascar.
Right.
Those who were exploring and they were going and visiting Africa, they would refer to Madagascar as the island. And so they're still using the term, but now they're not referring to the same thing.
To the same thing, yeah.
So the anchor of the term, the ground in reality of the term, Madagascar, is now split to refer to two different things. But then also you could say generally throughout the rest of history, what's happened now, and because the generations that used to live in mainland Africa have died off, there's actually not even been a split anymore. There's now just a change in reference.
Yeah.
So what used to refer to mainland Africa now is just referring to an island. And so that's occurred again. It's called referential drift. So the word Madagascar is now changed in reference from a part to another part. And so this is what Gareth Evans was saying is that when we refer to things, we don't just just to give you a very brief background.
Yeah.
So Gareth Evans was responding to Saul Kripke, a very famous and influential philosopher. And he was Saul Kripke was trying to battle a previous understanding of what we mean by names or what we refer to when we use a name. Because before, people used to believe that when you use a name, you are basically just a name, is just synonymous with a descriptive term. So, for example, Aristotle, for someone who used to believe in what's called the descriptive theory of names, Aristotle was just basically a synonym for the philosopher, the ancient Greek philosopher who was the teacher of Alexander the Great.
Right.
And so what it does, basically, a name only refers when there's something that fulfills that description.
In reality.
If there was no Aristotle that was born in ancient Greece, was never the teacher of Alexander the Great, then that name wouldn't refer. But then Saul Kripke was saying that's just not how names normally work. Names normally work irrespective of the descriptions that we have internally of people. So, for example, my daughter knows my name, Josh, and she might use the name Josh, but she wouldn't know various descriptions about me. But we'll still say that she's correctly using the name, referring to me. So what Saul Kripke was saying is that basically when reference holds when there's a baptismal event, when my parents named me Josh, and then from communicative chains, people started referring to me as Josh. My parents told other people Uncle Josh, other people told other people Uncle Josh. So how you refer to things is just that you're part of this chain. So my daughter now is part of the chain that's been going on for 33 years. And so she correctly refers to me just because she heard from someone else that I'm called Josh, myself, or someone else. And that's why she's able to refer to me correctly. But then Gareth Evans said, well, this is great, but it doesn't tell us how names can change in their reference. And so he says that there's an additional thing. It's not just that names need to have a causal link between one person communicating to another, the name, but it also, there has to be something called a dominant, I'll make it easier. Sorry. There needs to be a file of, so basically he was saying that there needs to be a dominant source of information. That was the term he used. But sort of an easier way of understanding it is there basically needs to be a file on the person that you're referring to, that the community has in their community chest. So what he means is that in order for me to track if a name really refers to something, there has to be a dominant file of information about that person. So, for example, with Madagascar, the community that was living in that area had a file, let's say a metaphorical file, that was in their community chest, which said Madagascar, and then it had details about Madagascar. Madagascar, and then it had mainland Africa, blah, 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 X amount of people living, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And that's the key information about Madagascar. And so he's saying that names refer through causal links, but the way that we can track if a name still refers is if the information about that thing is still held by that community.
Right.
Now, what happened with Marco Polo is that basically he went into the community chest and he opened up the file and he crossed out mainland Africa and he put in island. So now that term Madagascar was not able to pick out anything within reality anymore, because if we were saying, well, where is Madagascar? Well, Madagascar, we look at our information we have on it. Well, Madagascar is referring to an island. It doesn't refer to
Mainland Africa.
Mainland Africa. And so that's when reference changes. When the dominant source of information is changed or is rewritten or it's negated, then it changes in what's being referred to. So bringing this now back to the God question. So Christianity, Islam, they stem from the Abrahamic faith. So they have Abraham as sort of the patriarchal prophet. Basically what was passed on through Abraham was the belief in the supreme creator of all reality. Okay, so if we were looking at the community chest of the Abrahamic sort of religion at the time of Abraham and after, it would have God, and then it will have supreme creator, one supreme creator of everything. Okay, and then later on through Christianity coming about as one of the Abrahamic faiths before Islam,
Jesus came and edited
additional information. Yeah, there was additional information that was added to the dominant file, dominant source of it. It wasn't just saying one supreme creator of everything,
something
but
changed.
Also the eternal generator of the Son and the Spirit. So there was now an additional bit of information that was added to the community file on God.
Yeah.
And so that was what the information about God was now. If we were speaking about God post-Christianity within the Abrahamic faiths, we would say, yeah, God is the creator. God is the supreme Lord of everything, but he's also the Father of Jesus Christ. He's also the sender of the Spirit, or the eternal, the Spirit eternally proceeds from him. So this information was part of the community file, which allowed people to track what we're speaking about when we speak about God. And this is how we knew when, let's say, someone who was a pagan was speaking about God, they weren't speaking about the same God.
Yeah.
Their term God had different dominant source of information that was written down. But then let's say we continue now with this sort of Abrahamic faith going through Christianity, then leading to Islam. When Islam came about, what Islam did is that Islam reopened the community chest, and brought out the file of information. But what it did, it crossed out something. Christianity didn't do that with Judaism. Christianity added something, but it didn't negate anything Judaism said, because Judaism didn't say anything about God is not the creator, God is not the eternal generator of the Son. It didn't have that information, so it didn't negate it. So all Christianity did was add. And then what Islam did, Islam went in and crossed out and said, no, God does not beget, neither is he begotten.
Right. Just as a little pause there, because I really want to, because I'm not, number one, I'm loving this. I just want to say this as a fact. I'm loving this, Josh. Thank you so much, right? Chat is loving it. Everyone's loving it. We got 91 people on YouTube and like probably 100 or something on TikTok. So this is great. To continue though, just as a little pause there, is there something particular to Islam crossing out when it comes to engaging with the dominant source of information that is different from Christianity adding in? Is there something like fundamentally different that really is substantial for our conversation here? Or is it just something that we just need to know as a footnote and then we move on?
Yeah, no. It is very important, because if you remember what I was saying, the dominant source of information is what maintains the reference to the thing. So when the dominant source of information is rewritten in the sense that it's changed, but not, because when I mean change in addition and change in negation, they're very different forms of change.
Yeah.
One is one that can still be maintained within that community. One causes a split in the community.
So this is
Oh my gosh,
so this is why Jews, in this sense, right, Jewish people, in some sense, you'd be more sympathetic to saying that Jewish people may worship the same God as Christians, but get something wrong about God.
I'll come back to
that. I'm sorry. I'm preempting that. I apologize for that.
No, thanks for thinking ahead, and that's really good.
Yeah.
But I'll come back to that, because there's an interesting nuance.
Now, please expand on that nuance, please.
Yeah. But what with the adding to the dominant source of information, it wasn't such that there had to be a split in the community within the Abrahamic faith. So I'll give you an example, and this is what I bring out in the paper as well. When the followers of Christ became Christians, they started following Christ as disciples, and then Paul also converted and became a Christian. It wasn't that they had to recant their theological beliefs about God. They didn't have to go and say, "Oh, I can't be a Christian. I can't believe that God is the father of Jesus and also be a Jew anymore. I have to recant. They didn't have to do that. There was no controversy about their theological beliefs about God.
About the
The
Father,
only
right?
controversy they had is, how do we access God? Do we access God still through the law, still through circumcision, or do we access God now through the merciful sacrifice of his son, Jesus?
Amen.
And so what was up for debate was salvific application, or for those who are the followers of Christ and those who are not the followers.
Yeah.
But what was never up for debate was the idea of, do we need to change our theological beliefs? Because that, for them, it was just carrying on. It was just an update to the system. The same way that, for example, there was an update to the system, or not breaking down of the system with Judaism itself. So if you let's say you go back to the prior to the kingdom of Israel, God was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He was the God of the prophets, but he wasn't the God of any king. And so what was also what was added to the dominant source of information is that God is the king. God is the Lord who rules through the king, David, Solomon, and so forth. So he has the kingdom. So the point here is, so for example, N.T. Wright is very big on this, saying that God is king, or God became king. So prior to God having a kingdom through Israel, he wasn't king as such. He wasn't ruling as king. He was God. He was Lord. The king, to be a king, you have to have a kingdom. Yeah. And that only occurred when there was a king that was established and a kingdom of Israel that was then reestablished. Because then what the Jews believed when their kingdom was destroyed is that, when is God going to become king again? When is he going to rule over Israel again? And so the idea here is that the dominant source of information was changed when God took on Israel as a kingdom and not just as his people that he had rescued from the Exodus. So what I'm trying to say here is the dominant source of information was always being updated. And then it got updated again with Christianity through the revelation of Christ, saying that God is the supreme creator. He's the king, ruling through the kingdom of Israel, but also he has an eternal son, Christ, and he has an eternal spirit that proceeds from him. And that was added to that. And it didn't negate from the prior information that was already there.
Because it's just adding more information, right?
It was just adding more information.
Okay.
But then when it came to Islam was actually negating what was written
already there.
Source. Right. Because it was already there that God is the source of the Son and the Spirit. And then Islam had to go and negate that and say, no, he's not the source of the Son and the Spirit, because God now revealed to us through Jibril and the Prophet Muhammad, the Quran says God does not beget, neither is he begotten. So he does not have a son. Right. So what happened here was there was a rewriting, but a rewriting through denial. What was now happening was members of the community. So let's say now you have the Christians and you have the Muslims, and they are all part of the same Abrahamic community. Yeah. One was now saying, but sorry, no, our dominant source of information has that God does beget. Yeah. And the other one was saying, no, the dominant source of information needs to say that God doesn't beget. So we don't believe what you're saying anymore. So they were crossing it out. The Christians were saying, no, you can't cross it out. So basically what was now happening was there was now a split that occurred. Right. So that now when the Christians were using the word God, they were referring to the being who's the supreme creator of all, but also the father of the Lord the Son, Jesus Christ, Jesus, and the Spirit. But then there's the Muslims, when they were speaking about it as a community now, they were saying, no, God is a supreme creator of all, but he has no son.
Is there something I could just say to that? No. Finish that thought, and then I'll add.
All I was just saying is, when you negate something in the dominant source of information, especially something that's essential to the thing that you're referring to, you're now splitting the reference.
See, this is
the
what
word that you're talking about is now split within the community amongst those who hold to it. Yeah.
So this is interesting, right, Josh? So recently, as you know, there have been debates upon debates of people trying to argue that when people like Christians and Muslims disagree on aspects of theology and about God, the only way you can have a disagreement, according to every theory of reference ever, which is not true, but according to theories of reference, is if you are referring to the same thing, right? I can't disagree about what's on my lock screen unless, right, I actually are talking about the same phone on my lock screen. But what you seem to be saying, Josh, which is something similar to what I've said if you looked at my previous video and the video I sent you, is we're not Christians and Muslims, particularly in our theological diatribes, we are not disagreeing about the God that we are worshipping, about the God that we are referring to. We're not disagreeing about the same God, but we're actually disagreeing about the source of information. What it sounds like you're saying, because it sounds like when you talked about that split with Christians and Jews, what happened is that Christians came in, they added things in to the source of information, right? The term is the source of information, correct? Yeah. And so Jews were like, oh, okay, well, I don't really like this new addition to the source of information, so I'm going to check out. But they were still referring to the same God because they still had like the same source of information, and it's just that the Christians added something in. But what you're saying is when Muslims came around, they took something out that had already been established for, let's say, the past 500 years. And they said, we're going to have a different source of information. And so a different source of information obviously would constitute a new reference or a new descriptor, being God. And then Christians would have another different, distinct source of information that hasn't been edited in this way for the past 5 centuries or so. You're saying, therefore, and please correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm getting this sort of strain of conversation wrong, the actual disagreement amongst Christians and Muslims is not on is not on God, it's not on the same referent, but rather the source of information. Is that the disagreement?
That's exactly it. So the disagreement is about what constitutes a source of information, but why that also then leads to different reference. So basically it's about priority here. So what we're really disagreeing about is what constitutes a dominant source of information that allows us to track the usage of the name God. Now, when we have the dominant source of information at a community level saying that God is the eternal generator of the sun, but then we also have a dominant source of information which says that he's not the eternal generator of the sun, then we cannot be tracking the same thing, because one is going to track, we indicate, okay, the green light comes on, God is here. The other one's going to say, no, that can't be God is here, because the dominant source of information doesn't have that being you're talking about. It must be talking about whatever this thing is here. And so it doesn't allow you to track the same being. So what happens here then is that basically what occurs is there's a split in the reference when the dominant source of information has disagreement and denial taking place. So then what really is occurring, is that there is 2 different referents. So there are 2 different grounds of things within reality that's being referred to. The same way that with the Madagascar example, the word for the tribe that's living in the mainland Africa, the word Madagascar will be picking out where they're living in mainland Africa.
Right.
But for the explorer, the European explorer, the word Madagascar will be picking out something which is an island. And so what has happened is, just because there's been a disagreement about the dominant source of information, the tracking device has now tracked 2 different things.
You're not disagreeing about what Madagascar is, but, and this is important in our conversations as well, because a lot of people say, like, you can even hear me doing it when I said, hey, oh no, we are disagreeing about Madagascar. It still sounds like you're disagreeing about Madagascar, but what you're getting at is the reason why we're using Madagascar is we're not even talking about Madagascar in the proper sense of just the referral term, because otherwise you would be talking about the same island. But the reason why we're using Madagascar is a sort of placeholder for the actual sources of information that we disagree on. Like, say for example, like people said SIIG is a guy with a mask, right? For like, I don't know, 2 years now, right? SIIG is a guy with a mask, right? And I don't know, he's black and has like really trash hair or something. I don't know, right? Gets no trim. Cool. They say all these kind of things about SIIG, and then they disagree with SIIG, okay? But then some people say, oh no, SIIG is a guy that doesn't wear a mask and he actually has a really nice face, whatever. Now they could be disagreeing about me. But imagine if there's a situation where someone said SIIG is a theologian, and then someone else came and disagreed and said SIIG is a drug dealer. In the second analogy, they're not disagreeing about the same SIIG per se. They're actually disagreeing about the sources of information that generated that particular term of reference. Am I getting that point right?
Yeah, you are. What would be important, though, is that to further nuances, is that what's in the dominant source of information are essential qualities.
Right. It
could be that, not saying that you are, but let's say another SIIG is a theologian and a drug dealer.
Hey, I could be. It could be power. I could be Ghost. You don't know.
Yeah.
I could be.
Yeah. So it could be that. So you could still be referring to the same thing, but where you have like let's say SIIG is, when I'm using the term SIIG, I'm referring to a human being. When I'm using the term SIIG, I'm referring to a car. A car and a human being cannot be the same thing at the same time. So what you're happening here is, if I now, SIIG used to refer to human being, but then now I use SIIG to refer not to, let's say SIIG has a certain color, is black, is this, and the car is black and this and this. But then I say SIIG is a human, and then this person said, no, SIIG is not
SIIG is a
human, SIIG is a
car.
car. Yeah. Then you're just not referring, you're
To the
not
same
talking
thing.
about the same thing. You're using that word, but that one of them is referring to a human, the other one's referring to a car.
Yeah.
This is sort of where it dovetails with the water H2O example. So you'll hear a lot about people saying, well, what about water H2O? When the ancient used to refer to water as, let's say, that clear, drinkable liquid that's in the lakes. But they didn't know it was H2O. So were they referring to the same thing as a scientist that knows it's H2O? Yes, they were, because one had the dominant source of information as H2O. The other had the dominant source of information as H2O. But they were ignorant of that. So what was occurring at that time is that they latched onto whatever was the community's dominant source of information. And the dominant source of information is diachronic. So it doesn't necessarily mean to say that the community at that specific time has
this source of
H2O
information.
Having that. But the key thing is what they latched onto whatever was the dominant source of information. So if someone came to that ancient person and was able to tell them all of the molecular structure of water, would that person say, oh yeah, I have no problem, that's what water is? Or they say, no, that is not what water is. Water is 5-0, water is this and water is that. I doubt that they would go to that second position. They would say, I just didn't know. Okay,
I didn't know. This is interesting. This is actually an interesting point. Because I'm so sorry for the interruptions, please.
No worries. So they latch onto the community's dominant source of information.
Yes.
Because the way you test it is, would the ignorance still stay or would it leave? Would a negation of the dominant source of information still stay or would it leave? Once they are enlightened of it. If they're enlightened of it and says, the dominant, I have no problem, H2O, water is H2O, then they were latching onto whatever was the community's reference to water.
Right.
But if someone comes and says, no, I just do not believe water is H2O, I believe it's H5O. And so you have one person who's denying it and the community saying, no, water is H2O. Then what that person really is doing is that they're just using water to refer to
H2O. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not referring to it as what is understood as the community saying that this is
so
the case.
This is a point that I really want to touch on as well, because when it this is a point of nuance that people don't really understand, which is when it comes to Muslims, they want to put all Muslims really, or like most Muslims that don't debate, especially in the ignorant camp. But what it sounds like here is when it comes to the dominant source of information, not just sources of information in general, just like the specific dominant source of information by which a community actually, generates the referral of a term. When a community, say, for example, I don't know, with the water H2O example, they say, oh, I'm ignorant about these particular things and we already have a collective understanding of what water is supposed to be. Your example is just demonstrating that they had the same dominant source of information, but they just didn't have all the information about this dominant source of information added in. Some guy in 2022 comes along, obviously not 2022, whenever they called water H2O, and just added more information in, such that if they were to take that same dominant source of information, by the way, back into the past, they wouldn't reject it. They'd be like, sure, whatever, screw it, like science in it. But you're saying that with Muslims, to really tie the conversation back to Islam, the religion of Islam is such that every single Muslim, which is a Shahada declarer, by the way, every single Shahada declarer has to explicitly deny Christ as God. And not just deny Christ as God, but deny the person of the Father as being the generator of the Son. So they cross out many essential things within the dominant source of information that already exists and then acts as that. Now, they may be ignorant about the gospel, sure. They may be ignorant about like what Jesus Christ said and came and did, or even the doctrine of the Trinity. But in as much as the acceptance, or rather the adherence to Islam has already crossed out these huge essential things pertaining to God, they are also going to fall into the denial camp. Unfortunately, is that going to be an accurate?
Yeah, that's exactly. Well done again for the way you explained it. So
appreciate
that's
that.
Exactly it.
I'm just trying to help. I'm just trying to follow you.
Yeah, thank you. So by definition, a Muslim is just a submitter to Allah, and to be able to even be a Muslim, you need to submit to the will of Allah as expressed by the Shahada, which clearly says that there is only one God,
Mm-hmm.
Allah,
Mm-hmm.
and the final messenger is Prophet Muhammad. And so, just by the Shahada itself, the declaration of faith, which every Muslim would affirm
Mm-hmm.
and they will not deny, you have already there the denial of him being a father.
Right.
Secondly, you then also, as a submitter to the will of Allah, you have to submit to what he's revealed through the prophets, because that's part of the Shahada as well.
Mm-hmm.
And it says as clear as night and day in the Quran that God does not beget, neither is he
Begotten.
So
Yeah.
again, you have a denial of the eternal generation of the Son. So just to be a Muslim, you already have the negation built into your worldview.
Mm.
So it's not like the ancient doesn't have the negation of H2O built into their worldview. They're just
Right.
literally ignorant of what that thing is.
And so they negate it by ignorance rather than negate it by. They might not
Yeah,
even
so,
negate it. They're just going to be
it's not even
non-committal to it.
negate. It's just they have no clue what they're talking about. So
Yeah, they're non-committal.
they just have a limited source of information
Mm.
personally that they hold to, which is just clear drinkable liquid. But it's not built into their worldview that it cannot be H2O.
Yeah.
But what is built into the Muslims' worldview from the get-go is God cannot be an eternal generator of a son.
Right.
So what happens here is, even if you have someone who has never heard of Christianity, so I do take back my example at the beginning, and I would say that someone who is even, let's say, in a place where they've never heard about Christianity, what they would do, though, is that they latch onto their community's belief system, their community's dominant source of information.
About Jesus and about God.
Yeah, but which will say God is not an eternal generator. So if you take that sort of not even a time machine, you just take a transportation device, and you go to that person and you say to that person, okay, you come from England, and you get to that person, you say, God has a son called Jesus who eternally generated, and he's co-equal, he's homoousios with him.
Like all these things, yeah.
That Muslim would not be able, in any sense, as a right meaning submitter to God through Tawheed,
to submit to the thing that you just told him.
Yeah, they will not be able to accept that. But so what I'm trying to say to you is here, they would have to go and deny it. They might not explicitly deny it before they know of it, but they are already in a position and inclination of denial towards it through what's built into their worldview.
Yeah.
That God already cannot be a negator of God cannot be a generator of this.
So this is important because, like, you're gonna no, please finish the thought.
No, I was just saying. No, you can say it was just we can move on to sort of the Jewish example, because then someone would have the
because the same objection is going to hit to that, right? And this is exactly why I sent so there was another stream that I did. There was another clip from a stream that I did. It was the same stream, it was just a different person that was talking. He tried to use the example of Jews and said that a person who isn't formalized to the gospel doesn't worship the same God as you, may worship the same God as you, and then a Jew that is formalized, he was kind of a bit ambiguous, but he wanted to say maybe no. But before we get to the Jewish example, there is something that you like kind of clarified as well, which is we should clarify this. Sorry for stuttering, but we're not talking about whether or not this action of worship provides the person grace. At least I'm not. And I want to be really clear about that, because a lot of people, when they enter this conversation, especially if they are Orthodox and especially if they're Protestant, the only context by which they understand worship is something that allows a person to receive grace from God. Whatever your account of grace is, worship is an action such that you can receive grace from God. Now, I don't think we need to commit to whether or not a person's receiving grace in order for them to be worshiping. Like, presumably, demons have to submit to God because they can't do anything without the power of God. Demons submit to God, and yet they don't receive grace from God at all, right? They don't receive any grace. So clearly you can worship God without, getting grace. But you're making the argument here, not only do Muslims not receive grace, they're not even worshiping the same God. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, so I would say they're not worshiping the same God, because just because their referent is different. So whatever ground of the term that they're using in their worship practice, Allah, that's not picking out the God who is the Father. So it's not referring to the same thing that Christians are doing when they offer their worship to God. But what is very important to always highlight is this doesn't entail anything to do with salvific access to God, because we've all, I mean, majority of Christians will say, well, there's an ordinary means of salvation, which is through the holy mysteries. So Orthodox use the term, Catholics might use the term sacraments, that we access God and salvation and undergo the process of theosis through partaking of the holy mysteries. That's the ordinary means of salvation. However, God is not bound by the mysteries. God is sovereign over the mysteries and sovereign over all things. And so if he saves someone who is not correctly worshiping him, that is to God. So what I never, for me, I never make declarations about is salvation available to this person or this person or this person, because it's just not my position to take. All I can say is that, well, this is the ordinary means of salvation in which we are expected to partake. Of course,
right.
If you deny that ordinary means, again, I cannot say because it's not my position. But what I will say is God has said that he is revealed in Christianity that he is the Father of Jesus Christ. Paul says that so clearly. I mean, in throughout his writings, his terminology is he is the God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ. That's who he's revealed to be. Christ reveals God as the Father.
Right.
So what we can say then is that when we are intentionally in a relationship with him through our worship practice, through participating in the sacraments, that is offered up to the person who's revealed himself to be the Lord of Jesus, the God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ. But Muslims, when they are offering their worship through their prayers, through their fasting, whatever means of worship they offer to God, that is not offered to the God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ. And why that's not is because it's hardwired into their information pack about who God is.
Right.
That he's not the God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ. Right. And so that's why they cannot offer their worship to him. They offer their worship to the being who is the one created, but he's not the God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ.
Right.
But as there is only one God, and God has revealed himself to be the God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ, that reference is not aimed at that same referent. So, but if there's salvific, if there is a salvific implication of that, I can only be quiet on that. I don't know, because that's not my position on it. But all I can say is that worship can only be offered to what God has revealed himself to be, and we can only access God through his revelation that's found in Christ. And if we are not, then our referent is going to be something different, because that's what the community that you're part of has designated that to be.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for that. So we should probably move to like the Jewish example as well, which sounds crazy in the context. By the way, if you're a Nick Fuentes fan, just leave, please. I beg. Because you got two black people here and just like chatting philosophy, so it's just like Nick Fuentes' like worst nightmare. Okay. But like a Groiper's worst nightmare. I don't even know. That being said, right. So what is the distinction that you want to make? A lot of people will say symmetry breaker, but I'm not going to use symmetry breaker because it's just like jargonizing for no reason. What would you say is the difference, or the contextual difference, or the intentional difference between a Jewish person worshiping God? Let's do Jewish person before the advent of Christ. Let's say a Jewish person before the advent or the birth of the church. A Jewish person before the advent, and then a Jewish person post-advent. What is the difference between those two people?
So...
or is there, if at all?
So I would actually say there isn't a difference, because I wouldn't demarcate the forms of Judaism sort of prior and post Christ. What I would do is, the term I use is sort of first/second temple Judaism, and then rabbinic Judaism, because they're two different forms of Judaism. So first and second temple Judaism, which also with second temple goes after Christ, they were in a state of ignorance. So Abraham, when he was referring to God, he knew various aspects about God, but he didn't know that he was a father, because God is essentially a father. That means he's always been the eternal generator, the Son. But that wasn't revealed to him, so he was in a state of ignorance. The same way that the ancient is ignorant about the nature of H2O. They refer to H2O as a clear drinkable liquid. If you asked Abraham who God was, or if you asked Moses, you asked David who God was, they'll say, well, he's a supreme creator of everything, and he is the ruler of Israel. He is the Lord of Israel, the God of Israel. And so that was what the revelation was. So
Yeah.
they were in a state of ignorance about the other essential aspects of who God was.
Right. But they're not
Um,
denying anything. And this is interesting because you
but they're
actually
not.
have it
Yeah,
in your
yeah,
so in your paper, right? So I'm gonna just say page
yeah,
24 in the penultimate draft, guys. Everyone go to
yeah,
it. You actually make this particular objection specifically on Judaism and the church fathers,
yes,
and you
yes,
actually
yeah,
quote Justin Martyr. I did a stream; it's on Patreon if you guys want to
yeah,
access it. I actually go through the Justin Martyr passage specifically, and Justin Martyr actually says that they're not sacrificing to the same God. Justin Martyr
yeah,
says. Now that said,
yeah,
though, you say something really cool here, and I just want to read it if that's
yeah,
okay. This is Josh
yeah,
Sijuwade. He says. So he says, this patristic consensus appears to directly contradict our argument. And the argument is on rejection as opposed to ignorance, right? Ignorance, rejection distinction. He then says, if Jews worship a non-Trinitarian God, particularly post-Christian rabbinic Judaism, which explicitly rejects the Trinity, then according to our analysis, they should be worshipping a different divine being than Christians. Yet, the fathers consistently maintain that Jews worship the same God. Obviously, you take this position. This suggests either that our essentialist argument is flawed, which is the argument that we've just been talking about this whole time, which I've had a lot of fun doing, or that the distinction between ignorance and denial of essential properties is insufficient to resolve all cases of apparent theological disagreement. You then give an objection, a response to the objection as well.
yeah.
Do you want to talk a bit about that, or is that what literally we
Yeah.
were just doing before? We were
Yeah,
doing a
yeah.
little
So
bit of that
that's
before.
sort of what we're talking about now. So, yeah. So if you, I mean, the Father's quite clear that there seems, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the God of Jesus Christ, and so Christians and Jews, in that sense, were worshiping the same God. But what I was trying to sort of draw the line with is the Judaism that happened post destruction of the Second Temple is a very different form of Judaism, and this is not something new that I've discovered or anything.
Yeah.
It's very clear for a lot of scholars that the Judaism that sort of survived after the destruction of the temple had to sort of evolve and modify itself.
In
For example,
in
response to various aspects, but one thing was in response to Christianity.
which you mean,
Because I mean, you've got to think about it. By the time of the 3rd and 4th century, Christianity has spread around the known world. I mean, then by the 4th century, it was then taken on as a permissible religion. By the end of the 4th century, with Theodosius
the first,
it was taken on as the religion of the empire. So Christianity wasn't something which could just be put to the side with other sort of heretical or messianic movements that were within Judaism. And so what we sort of see within the sort of text to do with, these are sort of some commentaries that you'll find by some rabbis. I can send them to you later if you want, where they sort of respond and they speak about the nature of God, but they're very more explicit about the oneness of God, about his unity. And they do speak a lot that you do have sometimes where they do speak about, there is no other divine person but God. There is no other this. So there's a very more, there's a very hardening of the monotheism, which is affirmed by the Jews post Second Temple. Well, if you go to prior to the Second Temple, and this is throughout sort of the study of the ancient Near East, in sort of the Old Testament, but then also later with the Second Temple Jews, there is sort of a very pluralistic understanding of deity, such that there are many other deities and divine persons and beings, but the only one we worship is Yahweh. But there was an acceptance of, within their worldview, of the existence of other things which are deities or divine beings. But worship was only offered to one. But then what you have later is actually not so much now just worship being offered to one, but also the recognition of only the existence of one deity. And so there is now like a hardening of monotheism, which is very similar to what you have with Islam. There's a hardening of monotheism where there is no plurality of other deities that could exist.
And by hardening, you don't mean they are trying to be more faithful. By hardening, you specifically mean that they're trying to be more restrictive. on like
a lot more restrictive, because
yeah
I mean, this, Michael Heiser and others are very famous for this.
yeah
You see within the Old Testament there's sort of a recognition of other sort of deities, like or at least you'll have even in the Pauline literature, where he says, there are many gods, many lords, but there's only one God, the Father, and only one Lord Jesus Christ.
yeah
Or he'll call these beings false gods,
mm,
not necessarily negating their existence, but saying that they are not the God that we worship. There's not the God that we attribute our worship to.
yeah
So, anyways, what I'm trying to say is that there is sort of a restriction to what we mean by a monotheistic religion. Monotheism now is equated to the belief in the existence of one deity. People can fact check me. All sort of mainline scholars of Second Temple Judaism will never take that to be a correct understanding of monotheism in the Second Temple period. And even you have some people like Larry Hurtado
yeah
and a few others who have come back and said, some people have pushed back and said we need to retire the term monotheism and we need to use ancient Jewish monotheism, because that was definitely never the belief that Jews had, that there's only one deity.
yeah
They said there's only one deity we worship, and that's what makes us monotheists. But there is acceptance of the existence of other deities.
And by
So the key point
deity,
here is,
do you think that by deity here, like, because a lot of people are going to like throw around this term
yeah,
of deities,
yeah,
people are going to probably like
yeah,
start clipping things like this as well, which I
yeah,
appreciate. When you say
yeah.
by deity, just to like be clear, do you think that when it comes to like the Second Temple belief, that the Jewish idea of monotheism is that there are multiple like things that we can call like deity, and they are distinct from one another? Like, say for example, like the angel of the Lord, right, being deity in the sense that they carry these like divine properties, and then you have like Yahweh proper, or like Yahweh nominally, which has like this deity as well. They both are, deity in the sense that they both have this divine aspects about them. They're not separate deities, but you're just using the term deities in the plural to know like different things that we can point out in these religious texts as deity. So like you see like the Spirit of God, like the Memra, you got Yahweh, and they can all be encapsulating the same deity generally in the sense of, the same divine essence or same divine nature. But obviously you have these like nominal aspects, like for example, Yahweh proper, who sends Yahweh in Isaiah, right? The Lord God and his Spirit has sent me, Yahweh. That Yahweh or Lord God that's sending Yahweh, that is Yahweh nominally, or not Yahweh proper. And then you have like the Son, who is going to be the person that is sent, and he's a different deity in the sense that he is a different person that is deity as well. Is that sort of what you're saying?
So, sort of in a way, but what the scholars of Second Temple Judaism are really trying to say is, what they're saying is that deity can just pick out a supernatural being. So deity can refer to a supernatural being,
like an angel or a demon
yeah.
or something.
So,
Right. Okay.
but
I get it.
there's a grading of what a deity could be. So, for example, if I'm looking at that sort of picture of Second Temple Judaism, I'll say, yeah, there could be many deities.
Yeah.
There's only three perfect deities: the Father, the Son, and the Spirit.
Yeah.
And there are no other perfect deities outside of the Father, Son, and the Spirit. But what it seems to be with what you have with the hardening of monotheism later is there's not even a restriction of how many perfect deities there are, which is just one for them. But there's also just even sort of a denial of even the existence of deities outside of that of the perfect deity. So there's just such a less pluralistic and fluid view of what could actually exist within reality.
Right.
So, for example, some second temple Jewish scholars, again Larry Hurtado, say that
because it's something's important. So by like supernatural, so by deities here, like when you say that there's three deities, obviously we're escaping like the whole three gods objection, because people will take that out of context. By supernatural deity, by deity, literally you just mean a person that's supernatural. So like for example, like an angel or demon.
So I'm just saying, so when I say three perfect deities, what I'm just saying is three divine persons.
Okay,
so
cool.
We use the Trinitarian language of three divine persons. Second Temple Jewish scholars probably
would have said three perfect deities.
Yeah, because person is more of a modern term than at that period of time. But it's just it's just to sort of say that there is a pluralistic understanding of things that are supernatural.
Right.
But the key thing that demarcated the monotheism of the Jews from those of their neighbors was the worship of one deity, who is Yahweh. That's the idea here is.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Jesus ascended, there, and Larry Hurtado would say, there was sort of a mutation of this, such that there was now the worship of the Father through the Son. So now there was an additional person that was offered up worship, which was unprecedented. It was never within the Judaism that this was, but it wasn't such that Paul had to argue for this being the case. So it wasn't like Paul had to go and when he didn't have to stop, and when he said there's one God, the Father, and one Lord Jesus Christ, that he then had to give defense of the treatise of why this is the case. No, he just moved on. What he was defending was the idea of could the sacrificial offering that's made by Christ, is that sufficient for salvation, or do you also need to go through the liturgical means of salvation through the law? That was what Paul's problem was. So because again, there was a more fluid idea of what could be accepted as deity, and so on and so forth. So what I'm trying to get to here, to sort of just wrap up, because I will have to go very soon.
No, I know. I completely understand. I'm enjoying this.
Yeah. No. So what I'm trying to say is that with First and Second Temple Judaism, there isn't a denial of the Christian understanding of God. So when the First and Second Temple Jews, who were not Christians, were offering up worship to God,
they weren't.
And I'm talking about here the community level. I'm not talking about individual level.
Yeah. Of course,
there could be some individuals who came into contact with Christians, denied it, and then they won't be referring. But what I'm saying at the community level, at that point in time, of the time of Christ and then the time of the apostles, there wasn't sort of that community split, and you can see this as well because the Paul and his and the other apostles were happy to go to the synagogue. They were going to the synagogue still and preaching and doing that. And so the idea here is that there wasn't an explicit denial at the community level. And this is very important to emphasize. It's only when there's a communal denial is there a split in reference. So reference only splits. A term now has two different referents
on a community level.
Only when the community sort of splits regarding what's the dominant source of information. That hadn't occurred during the First and Second Temple period. There was just states of ignorance. But then when we have rabbinic Judaism, which was responding to Christianity in the formulation of some of its statements and doctrinal positions, you did have here a negation of what was essential to Christianity, is that God is the Father of Jesus Christ, the eternal generator. And so there are more than one divine person. So there was here a denial of this. So what you have here now is a split in reference for rabbinic Jews and Christians, but not for First and Second Temple Jews. And I give the example in the paper of how you can see this is, again, remember Paul and the apostles could easily fit into Judaism without having to rewrite and recant their beliefs. But look at how Messianic Jews are treated within Judaism today.
Yeah, they're not treated like they could just amalgamate themselves into the belief at all.
So what you have various statements by senior leaders within various Jewish communities who say Messianic Jews are not Jews. Like, so there are very clear statements that they are no longer accepted within the Jewish community. So you can see, obviously, there's a difference here. Why is there acceptance of the Pauline and of Paul's position and the apostles' position, and allowing them to be, they didn't have a problem with continuing with their Judaism, calling themselves Jewish Christians as such. But then Messianic Jews, they cannot call themselves really Jews or Jewish Christians anymore. It seems to be like an oxymoron. So because there was a rewriting of the dominant source of information for the community of Jews after the Second Temple period, which could have taken some time, but it was at some point there was a split now reference, such that when a Christian is referring to God, they're referring to the Father of Jesus. When a Jew is referring to God, they're not referring to the Father of Jesus. So they're in the. So when I'm again just emphasizing this, Rabbinic Judaism and Islam are in the same boat. First and Second Temple Judaism
are not in the same boat
as Christianity. They're not. So that's why there's no problem with Abraham, Moses, and all the other apostles. So all the other prophets worshiping the Father. Because there was no negation that he is a father. For Islam and for Rabbinic Judaism, there is a negation. And so there's that rewriting of the dominant source of information. So there's a tracking of two different.
There is a final thing that I do want to say, because you do bring up Gregory Palamas as well. And obviously, you talk about the Vatican II objection, but of course, people wanted to use Gregory Palamas as a person that sort of supports the idea, and especially it was in the Trent Chris debate, where Trent and Chris both basically used Palamas to argue that Palamas believed that Jews and Christians worship the same God. Are you aware of the developments in Palamas's letters? I don't know if you were aware of
No,
them.
I'm not.
So Palamas. So there's a book that Palamas wrote, that not Palamas wrote, but there is a edition by Norman Russell that came out in 2019, 2020. This is the 2022 edition. He has a bunch of letters, especially from the Ottoman Turks, where he was imprisoned by them when obviously they came to Constantinople, beat up the whole gaff. In one of those letters, Palamas relates about the fact that he used to think that Christians and Muslims, maybe innocently, were trying to pine after the same God, but he changed his mind after being imprisoned by them, and he was like, "Look, I don't, I don't even think we're talking about the same God anymore." And he was like really shocked. He was like, "Nah, like these men are actually bad." But then there's also dogmatic texts from some of his successors in the metropolitanate of in the archbishopric of Thessaloniki, who he was archbishop of. Simeon of Thessaloniki, in his work, he writes a book called Against Heresies. And in Against Heresies, he explicitly says how Muslims do not worship the same God and actually worship something completely different. He follows on from the whole Holosphorus controversy, where when a Christian who was Muslim beforehand had to renounce Islam, they had to renounce the God of Muhammad. And this happened for like a couple centuries until one of the emperors, I believe it was Alexios, wanted to remove it from the anathemas, but it was in every single catechetical text, even at the time of Gregory Palamas. So I thought that would be good information to know because I saw it in the paper as well, and I wanted just to let you know.
No, that is really good. That's a really interesting point. It's sort of that really provides good evidential weight to the position that Gregory Palamas wasn't, even when he was making that statement, it wasn't something which he was teaching dogmatically. So if he was even holding to Christians and Muslims worshipping the same God prior to what you were saying, then obviously for him to be able to let go of it, it wasn't something that he was definitively teaching. So what then I was trying to say in the paper is theological opinions do not necessarily
address.
They do not bind. They do not bind the conscience of Orthodox. And even if Palamas is received and his theological works are received for all Orthodox as they are, is that theological opinion something which was definitively taught by him, which was then given authoritative weight by the council? So that's my issue. So what I was also saying in that, which also dovetails with the other objections of, well, patriarch, ecumenical patriarch says this, and the patriarch of
Russia,
Moscow this. What I was just trying to say is there's a incorrect way of viewing authority that people have come into this debate with. They're coming in with a Catholic sort of mind frame that when a patriarch says something, or even a theologian of a saint, a theologian of such great esteem says something, and this necessarily means that you're bound to affirm that as the teaching of orthodoxy. That is not the case, because the way that Orthodox authoritative teaching has always been defined has always been through a consensus-based process.
And that takes time.
That takes time, and it's always been generally been through conciliar means, and it's also generally been through the consensus of the fathers. So when you pick out one father that might say something, even though that his Trinitarian theology might be accepted as dogmatic, doesn't necessarily mean that position is what has to be held as well. So I give the example, I don't think I give in the paper, but something like Gregory of Nyssa. Gregory of Nyssa, his Trinitarian theology was dogmatized at Constantinople I. So really a lot of what is said at Constantinople I is grounded upon the teaching of Nyssa and Nazianzus.
But his universalism.
Nyssa in particular, he held to universalism, or a form of universalism. Does that necessarily mean that because what was and his universalism is also tied to his understanding of who God is, who Christ is, that it's not divorced from it. So they're sort of linked together. Does that mean then, because we accept his Trinitarian theology, that you also have to be committed to his understanding of salvation being available to all, even potentially Satan? And everyone will say no. So it's always been that you're bound by what is the ecumenical councils and maybe some of the pan-orthodox councils after the Great Schism,
And the
and then
universal
what are we?
reception of it.
What is the and what is the consensus of the fathers
Yeah.
concerning a matter? And
Yeah.
so what I was trying to say is, when we look at the ecumenical councils and the consensus of the fathers, there is a convergence on God is essentially the Father. That is the definitive teaching of who God is. So anything which then goes against that cannot be taken on as orthodox teaching, given the weight of authority that the ecumenical councils and also the consensus of the fathers have. And so if a patriarch says something that doesn't have the same weight, the weight of someone like the Pope saying something within Catholicism, because Catholics are not just bound to the infallible teaching of the Pope and the magisterium, but also the ordinary teaching. So when the Pope teaches something through
Like his ordinary memes, let's say, like, for example,
ordinary,
he like teaches Catholics on something, or like has an address to like, there's even 3 Catholics, and then that gets publicized. That has you need to believe in that with the religious submission of intellect and will. Now that doesn't require the full assent of faith, but you got to try your best, you know. Whereas like a patriarch, for example, and people don't really understand this, when a person is a patriarch of Constantinople, or a person is a patriarch or a metropolitan or a hierarch, a hierarch is an individual that has an administrative role within the church and not a pedagogical role. He does not have a catechetical role that is different from his fellow bishops. Bishop is the highest rank in the Orthodox Church to preach and teach. All bishops, from like normal local bishop to diocesan bishop, obviously like a diocesan bishop is a local bishop, to even auxiliary bishops that don't have their own dioceses, right? That just got promoted to that rank, to patriarchs, to metropolitans, archbishops, all of them have the same equal teaching authority. So when the Patriarch of Constantinople comes out, at best, everyone in Istanbul has to believe what he says with the best ability that they can, but no one else does. And more importantly, what goes on is every single bishop under the Patriarchate must do their best to cede to what the Patriarch of Constantinople says. But in that measure, the Patriarch of Constantinople can't do anything without the consent of the fellow bishops of which he's under, because they are equal in their teaching authority. You will notice many times, and this is not just an apologetic for Patriarch Bartholomew, but you're aware of the quote, we all have the same God, whatever we may call him. But having the same God is clearly not the same as worshipping the same God. I think you would agree with me that a Hindu has the same God as us. Doesn't mean Hindus worship the same God as us. It's just positing the fact that God created everybody. And the patriarch is very ecumenical in his language as well, but he's never been to such a degree that, to the trained eye, that he's really problematic. Even in the most like ecumenist of statements, where recently he published a text, I believe in 2020, where he wanted to work on a religious ethos of like interreligious dialogue. He says, oh, you know, like Christians and Muslims, they are trying to approach the same God. He never says that they worship. He never, ever uses that particular intentional act. He will say they try to refer to, and this is why I say that Muslims may refer to the same God, but they don't worship the same God. That's why I make that particular distinction there, and obviously this agrees with your argument. But I think you'll agree with me when I say that I don't think the patriarchs are problematic in the slightest, even if we were to accept the statements that are being said.
Yeah, exactly. And also, let's say we were even to take the position that the patriarch does come out and say is very explicitly that Christians and Muslims do worship the same God. That doesn't change anything.
No.
Because I give the example in the paper that if that was the case, that when a patriarch just comes out and says something which is not in line with the teaching of the councils and the consensus of the fathers,
then over time,
then what would you do with someone like Nestorius?
Exactly. That was my exact thought. My exact thought was Nestorius.
Yeah. Because Nestorius was, he was teaching that Mary is not, Blessed Mary is not the Theotokos. And so the position here is, well, if I was just taking him at that time as a patriarch, does that mean I have to see to what he's saying and then go against what the council holds to because he's my patriarch before he's disposed? So no, you'll obviously say no. You'll say at the end of the day, he's bound by the consensus of the church on a matter.
And it's not just that as well.
Yeah.
Because I know that was the thing, but there's not just that.
Yeah.
In the Cyrilline controversy, Cyril and other patriarchs, by the way, not just bishops, other patriarchs, sent letters to the city of Constantinople telling them, hey, by the way, don't listen to Nestorius because he's not listening to the church. You are not at fault for not listening to him. So if there was something that Patriarch Bartholomew said that was actually problematic to the position that Christians and Muslims do not worship the same God, trust and believe other bishops, right? And not just bishops, but patriarchs, right? Administrative individuals would come out speaking against Bartholomew and admonishing the faithful to not do so. Clearly that hasn't happened yet. So clearly there's no problem with anything that Bartholomew is saying. And he actually has said recently he came to the monastery of John the Baptist, right? You were there. Are you aware of the clip?
No, I wasn't there, but I heard about it. It's very close to me, but I heard about it. Yeah.
So the clip was really clear. It's like, Muslims converted and now they worship the true God. I think it's clear enough that he doesn't actually believe it, but he's trying to be religiously nice and he's trying to represent himself as one of the heads of the Orthodox faith. He's trying to make sure that he doesn't sully relations with other people and then damage their conversion efforts purely because we're a bit anti,
So that's true. And so what needs to be understood is that there are different paradigms for authority that are being upheld within this sort of debate. And so even with what we were just saying about, with Cyril and with Nestorius, someone now, if a bishop wrote against the Pope on something, he would just be deposed, and that will be it. And you cannot come out and negate, even when it's something which is non-infallible teaching, because you have to give a religious submission of intellect and will.
Yeah,
you cannot come out and publicly deny what's being taught.
Yeah,
and so it's different from the Orthodox position. The Orthodox position has really checks and balances to deal with heretical or problematic positions being taken. Yes, it might take time. Yes, it might take a lot of time for some issues.
But that's good, though.
Checks and balances, and that is very good because things can't change then overnight.
Yeah.
And then secondly, it mirrors how the first millennium was like.
Yeah.
Things weren't even. I mean, think about how Constantinople won. Took a very long time to be received as ecumenical. No one would doubt its ecumenical status now. Just because something took time doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't something which was going to have the definitive weight that it does. So the key thing I'm trying to say here is Orthodox are not bound to the argument that I give. If someone just tries to do a tu quo and says, well, what about you guys? You have the same problem. No, we're not working within the same paradigm.
Yeah.
So,
and by paradigm, you literally are going to give like a constructive, and this is what we were talking about before. Like, obviously, I'm not going to spoil the party for when you're going to announce it, because I'm going to be there. I'm not going to spoil the party, Josh. I'm not going to say anything, okay? My lips are sealed. But this is what we were talking about when it talks about creating a positive account of the faith and not just saying, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, and just making a negative account. Because a lot of people are really good at saying, why I'm not this, why I'm not. And I see this in academia as well, where someone will make an article and they will see like this little sentence, paragraph that this other academic did, I don't know, in Helsinki. And then they will respond and be like, this academic is wrong for X and Y reason. And here is the semantic account that I use to particularly demonstrate such belief. And like, they go on and on, right? And then they're like, okay, like, could you provide an alternative? No, I just wanted to critique the understanding. It's like, you're lazy. You're theologically, academically, philosophically lazy. You don't want to provide a positive account because it's too much work. And now you're in the hot seat. You're not. I don't want to swear. Whoa. Someone's about to have it. But you get what I'm trying to say. That was just my little academic grab. I don't know if you feel the same way. I don't know.
No, I do. And I think, it's about... I mean, specifically with this issue with Orthodoxy and Catholicism, it's about. I mean, you can go about if it is that someone knows that there are only 3 options on the table. You can use a process of elimination to take away the 2, and if it leaves the 1, then that's fine.
That's good.
Without you giving a positive reason for the 1 that's left over. But the issue that you have is it might not be that the you can limit it at just those 3. So when you don't know how many options are on the table, you don't just need to negate the others. You need to
provide a positive view.
Yeah, positive reason why yours could be better than not just the ones that you've negated, but also the ones that could be potentially put forward as candidates. But as I was saying to you off air, there will be the paper coming out hopefully very soon. While I try and give a case why the Orthodox Church is the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. I do believe it's very rigorously argued and very comprehensive, and hopefully it will contribute to the debate, as I hope this other paper has as well.
All right, Josh, I think that's all the time that I know definitely you have for this, but I'd love to, if I ever do this again, I'd love to have you on. I'm so sorry for the interruptions. You know, I was just
no. It's a dialogue, so no, don't worry about that.
Cool. I appreciate that, but listen, I got some plantain here that I need to scran. I have some plantain I need to scran. Where are you from, by the way? I never got to ask. Where are you from?
Yeah, so from Nigeria.
You're Nigeria as well. Wait, what tribe are you from?
Yes.
What people are you from?
So I'm Yoruba. Well,
get off my screen. Get off my screen. Okay,
my mom's Igbo, and
oh, your mom's Igbo.
Yes, yeah.
Yo, you know Igbo is superior. I just want to say that Igbo is superior. I just want to let you know I'm part of the Igbo Ambassadors Club. Okay, I'm an ambassador for Igbo land. Yes. Anyways, Josh, thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, man. It was a blessing to have you on. Take care and God bless you.
Thank you.
All right. Goodbye. Do I do that or do I? Oh wait. Do I just? Okay, because wait. Oh my gosh! Now everything is fritzed. Okay. I was gonna keep the stream going. That's why I was gonna keep streaming. So
yeah, thanks so much, man. I've got to rush off because I think my wife's been holding thought.
Oh, tell the wife I said hi and tell I said sorry. Tell I said sorry.
No worries. No worries, man. No, thanks so much. We'll speak more, and you've got my number, so we can definitely.
Of course. More, thank you so much, man.
Have a good one, and we'll speak soon.
All right, thanks, man. Have a good one.
Hope the exams go well. And
appreciate it. Thank you. God bless, man. Take care. Oh, that was sick. No, I appreciate that, man. That was cold. I really did appreciate that, guys. We had how many people in here? Yo, how many people do we have in here, chat? I don't even know, bro. I don't even know. That was cold. That was cold. I like that.